It was a Sunday morning. On October 19th, 1986, journalist Dele Giwa was at home when a package was delivered to his residence. At first, it appeared to be an ordinary parcel, but inside that package was a bomb. When the package was opened, it exploded. Dele Giwa was critically injured. 2 days later, he was dead. Nigeria was stunned. But the tragedy was only the beginning, because investigators now faced a question that would remain unanswered for decades. Who sent the bomb? Was it the work of a political enemy? Was someone trying to silence a journalist? Or was there another motive that the public never discovered? The investigation would become controversial. Accusations would be made. Theories would spread. But no one has ever been convicted of Dele Giwa's killing. Nearly 4 decades later, the question remains, who put the bomb inside that package? Firstly, welcome to Ed Franco's YouTube channel, where we uncover real mysteries, unexplained cases, and forgotten stories from Africa's past. Today, we're traveling back to Nigeria in 1986 to talk about the death of one of the country's most influential journalists. His name was Dele Giwa. He was a journalist who challenged powerful institutions, reported on controversial issues, and helped build one of Nigeria's most respected news magazines. But on October 19th, 1986, a package arrived at his home, and what happened next would shock Nigeria and leave behind a mystery that remains unresolved to this day. Before we examine the investigation and the unanswered questions, we need to understand the Nigeria in which Dele Giwa was living and working. In 1986, Nigeria was not being governed by an elected civilian administration. The country was under military rule, led at the time by General Ibrahim Babangida, who had taken power in August 1985. For many Nigerians, politics was no longer something discussed only inside government offices. It was being debated in newspapers, magazines, universities, workplaces, and homes, and one of the most important voices in that conversation was the Nigerian press. Journalists were reporting on corruption, politics, the economy, and the decisions of powerful people. But reporting on powerful institutions could also bring pressure and controversy. It was in this environment that Dele Giwa and his colleagues were building something different. A magazine willing to investigate stories that other publications might approach more cautiously. That magazine was called Newswatch. By 1986, Newswatch had become an important part of Nigeria's media landscape, and Dele Giwa was one of the men at its center. He was outspoken, he was influential, and he was willing to ask difficult questions. But then, in October 1986, the relationship between journalism, politics, and power would take a devastating turn. A package would arrive at Dele Giwa's home, and within moments, Nigeria's media landscape would change forever. And before he became the victim of one of Nigeria's most notorious unsolved killings, Dele Giwa was a journalist, a writer, an editor, and one of the most recognizable voices in Nigeria's press during the 1980s. His full name was Sumaila Oladele Giwa. He was born in 1947 in what was then British Nigeria. From an early age, journalism became more than just a profession for him. It became a way of asking questions. Giwa eventually worked with several newspapers, including the Daily Times and the New Nigerian, before spending time working in the United States. When he returned to Nigeria, he brought with him experience that would help shape a new kind of journalism. In 1984, Dele Giwa joined forces with fellow journalists Ray Ekpo, Yakubu Mohammed, and Dan Agbese to establish Newswatch magazine. The magazine was different from many traditional newspapers of the time. It focused heavily on investigative journalism, political reporting, analysis, and stories that demanded attention. And Dele Giwa became one of its most prominent figures. He was known for his strong writing style and his willingness to challenge powerful people and institutions. But influence comes with attention, and in Nigeria's politically tense environment, attention could come with controversy. By 1986, Dele Giwa was no longer simply a journalist working behind a desk. He was a public figure, a powerful voice in Nigerian journalism, and someone whose work had placed him close to some of the country's most sensitive political issues. Then came October 1986. On the morning of October 19th, a package arrived at his home in Lagos. It was addressed to him, and what appeared to be an ordinary delivery would soon become one of the most infamous packages in Nigerian history. Dele Giwa was at his home when a package was delivered to him. At first glance, there was nothing about the package that immediately suggested what was inside. It was simply a delivery. But according to accounts of the incident, the package contained an explosive device, and when Giwa opened it, it detonated. The explosion left Dele Giwa critically injured. He was rushed to the hospital. Doctors fought to save his life, but the injuries were catastrophic. 2 days later, on October 19, 1986, Dele Giwa died. He was only 39 years old. The news about his death spread rapidly. A prominent journalist had been killed inside his own home by a bomb hidden inside a package, and almost immediately the question became unavoidable. Who sent it? The killing was not treated as an ordinary crime. The circumstances surrounding the bombing raised questions about who could have obtained the materials, who could have delivered the package, and whether the attack was connected to Giwa's work as a journalist. The investigation would soon attract enormous public attention, and it would also become deeply controversial. But there was another detail that would make the case even more disturbing. Before the bombing, Giwa had reportedly been contacted by Nigerian security officials. Questions were raised about meetings and communications involving him and government authorities in the days before his death. What exactly had been discussed? Why had those contacts taken place? And did they have anything to do with the bomb? These questions would become central to the controversy surrounding the investigation, but questions are not proof. And decades later, no court has established who was responsible for placing the bomb. What happened that Sunday morning was only the beginning of the mystery. People asked questions: who prepared the explosive device? Who delivered the package? And most importantly, who wanted Dele Giwa dead? The Nigerian authorities launched an investigation into the bombing. Investigators examined the circumstances surrounding the package, the explosion, and Giwa's activities in the days leading up to his death. But the investigation quickly became controversial. One reason was the political environment in which the killing occurred. Nigeria was under military rule, and Dele Giwa had been a prominent journalist reporting on political affairs. Attention also turned to contacts between Giwa and officials from Nigeria's security establishment shortly before the bombing. One particularly important issue was a meeting involving Giwa and security officials just days before his death. The exact significance of those contacts became a major subject of public debate. Then came the allegations. Some accounts pointed toward possible involvement by people connected to the military government. Others disputed those claims. Names were mentioned, accusations were made, and the investigation became increasingly complicated. But there is an important distinction we must make. An allegation is not the same thing as proof, and suspicion is not the same thing as a conviction. Despite the controversy surrounding the case, no one was ultimately convicted in court for Dele Giwa's killing, and that left the central question unanswered: who was behind the bomb? Over the years, the case became a symbol of the dangers faced by investigative journalists and a reminder of the unresolved questions surrounding Nigeria's political history. But the investigation itself left behind another mystery. Were the authorities simply unable to find the person responsible, or did the investigation fail to uncover the complete story? We may never know. But to understand why the case became so controversial, we need to examine the theories that emerged after Dele Giwa's death, because over the years, different explanations have competed for attention, and some of them point in very different directions. And for almost 4 decades, one question has remained at the center of the Dele Giwa case: who sent the bomb? There have been different theories, but none has been proven in court. So, Let's separate what has been alleged from what has actually been established. One theory is that Dele Giwa was targeted because of his journalism. At the time of his death, he was an influential journalist working in a politically sensitive environment. His magazine, Newswatch, had built a reputation for investigative reporting and political coverage. Some people therefore believed that the bombing could have been an attempt to silence him. But there is an important problem with this theory. A motive is not proof. There has never been a court judgment establishing that Giwa was killed because of his journalism. Another theory emerged from the contacts between Giwa and Nigerian security officials shortly before his death. Those contacts became one of the most controversial parts of the case. Critics questioned whether the circumstances surrounding those meetings could be connected to the bombing, but officials who were accused of involvement denied responsibility. And despite the allegations and years of controversy, no court has established that Nigerian security officials ordered or carried out the bombing. That distinction matters because an accusation repeated for decades does not automatically become a fact. There is another possibility that the person or people responsible were never identified. The package could have been delivered as part of a carefully planned attack, and whoever organized it may have disappeared before investigators could establish their identity. If that is what happened, then the most important evidence may have been lost forever. 3 possible explanations, but no definitive answer. And that is what makes the Dele Giwa case so haunting. The evidence has been debated, the allegations have been repeated, the theories have survived, but the person who placed that bomb has never been convicted. So perhaps the biggest mystery isn't simply who killed Dele Giwa, it's this: why, after all these years, has no one been held responsible? And that question takes us to the legacy of Dele Giwa and why his death still matters today. He was part of a generation of Nigerian journalists who believed that the press could do more than simply report events. They believed journalism could investigate, question, challenge, and hold powerful institutions to account. Through Newswatch, Giwa and his colleagues helped establish a magazine that became known for its investigative and political reporting. His death therefore affected more than just his family and colleagues. It sent shockwaves through Nigeria's media community. A journalist had been killed by a bomb delivered directly to his home, and the person responsible was never convicted. For journalists, the case became a reminder of the risks that can accompany investigative reporting. For historians, it became part of the complicated story of Nigeria's military era, and for the public, it became a mystery that refused to disappear. Today, Lagos looks very different from the city Dele Giwa knew. Technology has changed, the media has changed, Nigeria has changed, but one thing has remained remarkably constant: the question, who sent the bomb and why? There may never be a definitive answer, but remembering Dele Giwa isn't only about remembering how he died, it's also about remembering how he lived, the stories he investigated, the journalism he helped build, and the questions he believed were worth asking. Because sometimes, the legacy of a journalist is not the number of answers he gives, it's the questions he leaves behind. Imagine a package arrived at a journalist's home. Inside, it was a bomb. Seconds later, his life was changed forever. Nearly 4 decades have passed since that morning. The headlines have faded, the newspapers have become history, and the people who lived through that period have grown older. But one question remains: who sent the bomb? Was Dele Giwa targeted because of his journalism? Was someone trying to silence him? Was the truth lost somewhere inside the investigation, or was the person responsible simply never identified? We know what happened to Dele Giwa. We know that a bomb was delivered to his home. We know that he died from the injuries he suffered. But the person ultimately responsible has never been convicted. And perhaps that is what makes this case so haunting. Not simply the violence, but the silence that followed. Dele Giwa died in 1986, But the question he left behind has survived for generations. Who sent the package? Maybe one day, the answer will finally be known. But behind every mystery, there are real people, real families, and real lives changed forever. So when we tell these stories, we owe them more than speculation. We owe them the truth. If you want to discover more real mysteries and forgotten stories from Africa, subscribe and join us for the next video.